Welcome back, guys. I'm Alan Biggers. If you are new to the channel, welcome. Today's going to be a little bit different from my first video. This is going to be a full breakdown and review of Wakanda Forever. I just saw it. It was fantastic. I spent all night writing down all the things that I loved and my opinions. But before we begin, this will contain spoilers for the movie. So if you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. Come back to my video and we'll talk. Okay? Give me the time. Now's the time. Sweet. Okay. As background, before we dive into what happened in the movie, we need to remember what happened in the first movie. Okay? We left off with King T'Challa, and he, played by the late, great Chadwick Boseman. And he was both King of Wakanda and retaining his mantle as the Black Panther when he fought off his cousin N'Jadaka, or Eric Killmonger, played by Michael B. Jordan. Okay, unfortunately, with Chadwick's passing in 2020 due to colon cancer, the studio needed to find a way to also have his character pass on. You know, it needed to be in a way that was respectful to Chadwick and his legacy, but also makes sense in the story, which is a very difficult thing to do. And I think they did it super well. So essentially they say that he got an illness, and the only way to cure this illness was to take more of that heart-shaped herb that we see in the first movie that grew out of the vibranium-rich soil in Wakanda, and when it was taken as almost like a drink, they would, make it into a paste and then into a drink. It gave them the power of the Black Panther. But if we remember in the first movie, when Killmonger comes to power, he takes it himself, gets the Black Panther power, and then burns the rest of them. So as he's dying, they figure out that he needs another one of these, the heart-shaped herb, and he can't get any because there's none left. So Shuri runs down into her lab, hoping to synthetically recreate its DNA to make a new one, and she fails. King T'Challa dies. And that's the beginning of the movie. Before we see the title card, before anything else, that's what we see. And we see this beautiful funeral scene. It's truly a celebration of both King T'Challa's life and Chadwick's. We see all the people in the capital city there dressed in all white and beautiful robes and garments. And I love that it's a mixture between modern clothes and almost traditional African garments that we see at the end of Black Panther when they've decided they're open their borders. And it just makes sense. So it's still, canonically there. I want to talk about the costume design. So Ruth E. Carter, she is the one in charge of costume design for Wakanda Forever. She's also in charge of doing the new Blade movie, which comes out in 2024, starring Mahershala Ali. And she killed it, okay? All of the costumes in this movie are fantastic. Everything in this movie. We're going to break it down. We're going to get there. But it looks fantastic. Okay? So again, it's this beautiful celebration of life. And we see, as they're walking down the street, we see this beautiful mural of King T'Challa. And, Queen Ramonda and Shuri look up at it. And then it's this whole thing. Okay? And then we see the title card. And it is the one that we saw from the digital release of Black Panther. That it's the Chadwick Boseman, it's all purple, it's, pictures of Black Panther and T'Challa, and it's just this beautiful piece. Okay, so time card, and then we jump forward a year. Okay, so now it's been a year since T'Challa's death, and one thing I do love about Marvel is they usually do a great job with their time jumps. There was that weird Spider-Man one where it didn't make sense with the blip, but they sorted that out, okay? This is a year later, okay? Kevin Feige did a very good job lining everything up. And we open on a UN meeting, okay? They're discussing about the potential risk of what vibranium is, and they're saying that Wakanda, after a year, has not shared its resources like King T'Challa said they would. Queen Ramonda shows up, and let me tell you, she is buff. The first thing I said, I turned to my wife and I was like, dang, like she is super buff in this movie. She looks great, okay? And all of the UN staff there, I believe it's a leader from France and there's a leader from the United States. And the leader from France is really getting on to Queen Ramonda, but like, hey, where's the vibranium? You said you were going to share. There really isn't much left in the world. And they make the point to say that it's undetectable. So even if they wanted to go look for it worldwide, that it's really hard to mine because they can't find it. And Queen Ramonda turns it back on them because she says that she isn't worried about sharing vibranium because of the potential it might have as a weapon of mass destruction, but she's worried that the potential that they would have if they had it. Okay, it's a very awesome back and forth, and while it's happening, they do a kind of like a back and forth shot as a mercenary group attacks an outreach facility that's not in Wakanda, but it's somewhere else, and looking for vibranium. They get to the vault, they open the door, and it's the Dora Milaje, the all-female guard, and, they beat them up, take them back, and Queen Ramonda has those mercenaries marched in and, thrown at the feet of this French ambassador, saying, look, we know what you guys want. We know what you guys whisper about if you had it, okay? You're not getting vibranium right now. That's not what's going on, okay? And because of this issue, the world looks for a new way to find vibranium. They know they're not going to get it from Wakanda. They know they can't take it from Wakanda. And so we open on this ship, military ship, in the middle of the ocean, and they send 2 divers down because they've found vibranium. And someone has come up with a way to, scan for it, and they've found some. When they get down to the bottom, the divers are taken hostage. They go on red alert, and we see soldiers on the ship jumping off the ship. We hear this song in the background, and they're jumping off the ship, and it's like, what's going on? And you kind of see some figures in the distance in the water, just their heads, and it's like a siren's call. And they are calling them off the ship. We don't know who. And the CIA scientists and the other military guy that's in there, they put in earplugs, they run up, and they try to escape. One of them gets killed, and they get on a helicopter, and they're flying away, and, the helicopter stops. Classic, helicopter stops, and it's thrown to the side, and this is the first time we see Namor, the Submariner. We see the people of Talocan that are not to be confused with Atlanteans. We're not sure if this is going to be the MCU's Atlantis or not, but this is Talocan, okay? So they are based on really old, Mesoamerican Aztec peoples. And we see Namor, the Submariner, for the first time. Oh my gosh, when they introduced him in the trailers, I was so pumped, okay? So Namor, our boy, he was first introduced in Marvel Comics in 1939, okay? He's written by Bill Everett. And he's one of the older characters in this franchise, okay? So, he's older than, Captain America, Iron Man, people like him. In the comics, Namor is the Prince of Atlantis, okay? And he is known as the first mutant, okay? He's the son of a human man and the princess of Atlantis, and he becomes, the leader of Atlantis. And he's known as the first mutant, which is huge. We'll get back to it later. But they've kind of retconned that whole background. We're going to get into his background when we get there in the story. But they are heavily based on the ancient Aztecs of the Yucatan. Okay, and they nailed it. He looks great. Denal Huerta looks amazing. He's the actor. And yeah, so they get attacked, and obviously all of them get killed, and they don't get any of the vibranium, the scientists. So then after that scene, we go straight to Wakanda, and we see that Queen Ramonda and Shuri go out for a drive, and they end up in kind of this plains setting. See some elephants, they're by some water, and Ramonda is going through what she says is a tradition of burning their funeral garb. So she has the white garbs, and they have a fire, and she's burning it, and it's supposed to be a symbol that the grieving process has ended, that they should be done. It's been a year grieving T'Challa, and that they need to go on to celebrating his life. And Shuri has her classic kind of back and forth that she had in the first movie of the scientific mind versus the tradition. We see her argue. We see her complain about this in the first movie, and this isn't like the childlike complaining that she did in the first one, where she's supposed to be the younger sister. She's supposed to be a little bit more childlike. She's definitely grown, and she is in pain. She confesses to her mom, like, the anger and resentment in her heart, and that she's clearly not done. She is not done grieving her brother. And they're going through this back and forth, and as they're discussing it, they're approached by Namor, who comes out of the water. And he tells them that an American scientist created this vibranium scanner. And Ramonda's like all put off, like, how are you here? Like, how did you get here? How do you have this what do you know about vibranium? And Shuri's like, he's covered in it. So what we know is that all of his garb, all of it, is made out of vibranium. Okay? And he tells them, look, you need to go find the scientist, bring them back to me so I can kill them, so that no one can figure out how to scan for more vibranium, and we'll be good. If you don't, there's going to be some problems. Okay? And he gives them like this conch and says, like, put it in the water, it'll summon me, whatever. Okay, so Ramonda wants to send just Okoye to go get it, and Shuri, and Okoye convince her to let Shuri go too. So they go to Boston to meet none other than Riri Williams, okay, or Ironheart. Okay, Ironheart in the comics, she's a 13 to 15-year-old girl. She has heavy inspiration from Iron Man and builds her own Iron Man suit. She's super genius like Tony. And in this movie, they've aged her up a little bit. She seems to be like 19 or 20, early in college. And she's played by Dominique Thorne, who does a fantastic job. And she's shown as like this genius MIT student. She has this like homework for hire business and going through all this stuff. And Shuri and Okoye, dressed to the nines, by the way, break into her dorm, warn her of the danger of these people, but they can't tell her who's after her. She's like, we need to go. You're in danger. That thing you made for the government. And she stops them. She's like, I didn't make anything for the government. I made that for a class. And, they said I couldn't detect vibranium. And I showed them I could, which we're going to get to how that kind of, her and Iron Man, that similar arrogance. Very cool. And okay, so we need to leave. So she's like, all right, I need to go to my garage. They go to her garage, and they get ambushed by the feds, okay? And Shuri and Okoye get on a motorcycle, on a car, and they leave, and Riri Williams is like, I got this, and puts on, this is our first glimpse of her, Mark 1 Ironheart armor, okay? And so she's flying away, they're fighting, the chase sequence is amazing, the music in this movie, all of the music in this movie is fantastic. How could it not be? It is a Black Panther movie. And we see this awesome moment where Riri Williams has to shoot down they have like a satellite drone following them. And she has to go up super high. And she has this moment, and it just brought me back to Iron Man 1. Brought me back to, late 2000s. Of her getting up into the air, she's losing oxygen, and she just starts falling. And I feel like all of our Iron Man-esque characters have this moment. In the first movie, there's the freezing problem. That's how he wins, and the freezing. And we see the same thing with Spider-Man, that he falls into the water. He goes up too high. It's this whole thing. Okay, but it was really cool to see that kind of frame by frame, almost mirroring that. Like, look, we do have a new Iron Man. She isn't trying to replace Tony Stark, but she is her own thing, and it's just very cool. Okay, so they finally escape away from the feds. They feel like they got it. They're on this bridge, and they get ambushed by the Talocanil and these people. And we see a super awesome fight. Okay, this is between kind of like the right-hand man. He's credited as Atuma. We never actually hear his name. But Atuma, kind of like the guy from the trailer that you see, kind of the big guy, he's wearing like a hammerhead shark. Okay, him and Okoye have this big fight. They lose, they being Riri, Shuri, and Okoye, and Riri and Shuri get taken by the Talocanil. And Okoye escapes, and it's this whole back and forth, okay? Because we see this, that even though they promise, Ramonda and Shuri, they promise that they're going to call Namor with this conch, He instead ambushes them and takes them. Okay. We go back to Wakanda. We see Okoye being stripped of her rank as the leader of the Dora Milaje, and she's pleading to the queen, let me keep my rank. This is my life. I want to die as a Dora Milaje. Have I not given enough? And that snaps something in Queen Ramonda. And this might be my favorite scene in the movie. It might be the best acted scene in the movie. And Angela Bassett gives probably the best performance that we've seen in the MCU in a while, that she is saying, like, I've lost my husband, I've lost my son, my daughter is missing, have I not given enough? And Okoye backs down, she stabs her spear in the ground, she leaves. And from there, we go to the kind of the comic relief of the movie. Agent Ross returns. Martin Freeman is back playing our favorite agent, or they call him the colonizer. And he shows up to the crime scene where Riri and Shuri were taken, and they're looking through everything, and he finds her beads, okay, her Kimoyo beads that they use to communicate with each other, and he takes them, puts them in his pocket, hoping to contact the Wakandans, okay? And we see again Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. She was, you might recognize her from Black Widow or Falcon and the Winter Soldier. She's the new director of the CIA. And there seems to be a little bit there between her and Agent Ross, and it's revealed later that they were married at one point. But yeah, he grabs these beads and he's going to try and get in contact with Wakandans. We jump to Haiti, okay? And we see Nakia, okay? Nakia's back. This is T'Challa's love interest that, remember, like, did he freeze? Oh, like an antelope in headlights. Like, when he saw her, he couldn't fight kind of deal. And she is in Haiti. She's teaching at a school. Queen Ramonda shows up and says, hey, you're our best spy. You were able to infiltrate nations. I need you to go find Namor to see what they've done with Shuri. And she agrees, and she heads to Mexico, to Yucatan. So she's speaking Spanish. Her Spanish is fantastic, and she learns of the legend of the Kukulkan, okay, the Kukulkan. And this is a true mythological, being. By true, it's mythology, but it's Aztec mythology, and it's directly translated to the feathered serpent, okay? It's the creator god of Aztec mythology, and very similar to Egyptian mythology. He's definitely someone you fear. And the locals say that they see him and he presents himself as a man with wings on his ankles. Okay, and this is clearly Namor. So she's looking around for more, and we jump to Riri and Shuri waking up in a sea cavern, and they're given these clothes to wear, and Shuri's given like this, royal garb because she is royal. She goes to meet with Namor, and Namor tells her the story of his people. Okay, they were normal Aztecs, and they were plagued by the smallpox that the Spanish brought over when they came as conquistadors to, Latin America. And their local tribal shaman gets a revelation from the gods to swim down into this cave and find this plant that's growing out of a glowing rock. We see glowing rock, we know vibranium. So, vibranium is here. A plant is growing out of it. He puts it down into a paste, just like the Wakandans did, and gives it to all of his people, saying, hey, this is going to cure you of smallpox, it's going to be better. Namor's mother is pregnant with him at the time. She fears what that's going to do to her baby, and yet is convinced otherwise to take it. They take it, and they all fall unconscious. When they wake up, their skin is blue, they can't breathe, they have gills, and they run into the water, and they swim away. Okay, so these aren't like Atlanteans that we know from other things where the Atlantis just exists. Okay, they were human, they took this, and they, now have gills. She ends up giving birth to Namor, and Namor is born not with blue skin, okay? He has pointy ears, and he has the wings on his ankles. And he calls himself the first mutant. He calls himself a mutant. Okay? This is the first time in an MCU film that we hear that word. We knew it was coming with Doctor Strange when we saw, Dr. Xavier. They mention mutation in Ms. Marvel, but this is the first time we hear mutant in a film. This is huge because of the back and forth between Disney and Fox. who owns what property. But still, he calls himself a mutant, which is crazy. Okay, and so he has the power of flight. He kind of has like super strength. He can breathe underwater and outside of water. And his last power that we learn is that he just lives for a really long time. So eventually his mother dies. Her dying wish is to go back and be buried where she lived. And when he goes back there, he sees that the Spanish have enslaved the rest of the Aztec people. And so Namor, young Namor, he looks like, 6 or 7, the actor, and a group of these Talocanil, they burn down that building, they kill off the people, they free the Aztecs, and the man there calls him the child without love. Now, in Spanish, the word amor means love, and so he makes his name No Amor, or Namor, and when we pronounce it, it would be Namor. Okay, so very cool. I love how they're keeping in with this whole idea. And after the story, Shuri is taken to Talocan, and we see this beautiful city underwater, lots of vibranium, they're trading, they're happy, and we see a vibranium sun come out of the water, like out of a little temple, and it's floating in the water, and it brings sunlight to his people. Very cool. I wish we could have seen more of it. And they bring Shuri back, and she gets this bracelet from Namor that's made out of the fibers of the plant that they took to become the Talocanil. And Queen Ramonda calls Namor. Namor shows up, so he leaves. And at that same time, Nakia comes and saves Riri and Shuri. They kill one of the Talocanil. And Namor gives a scary threat to Ramonda, saying like, hey, like, if you try to go toe-to-toe with us, you will lose. I will kill everyone else in Wakanda. When he returns, he sees that his prisoners are gone. He sees that one of his people are dead. And he declares war on Wakanda. He's like, that's it. We're done. Okay? And Wakanda's like, we can take them. We'll settle our defenses. And we see kind of the first big fight sequence of this movie. And Talocan shows up with a small group, and they destroy all of these Wakandans, okay? M'Baku shows up, he's like, if it were me, like, none of that would have happened before, and it looks like Namor almost killed this guy. I thought he did. Punched him super hard in the chest, broke all of that, gorilla armor that he has on, and, like, throws him back, and there's this huge fight. They're using, like, whales and water animals to travel, and they make these, like, grenades out of water that floods everything. And Namor attacks the throne room. And Riri Williams and Ramonda are pushed underwater. Ramonda saves Riri, but can't save herself, and she drowns. And now we're at another funeral. Shuri is grieving the loss of her mother. And M'Baku has this like one-on-one with Shuri, saying that before his death, T'Challa had asked to give protection and counsel to Shuri. And Shuri's like, look, I really don't care what you have to say. This is me paraphrasing. But we're going to get this guy. We're going to take the fight to them. And the Council of Elders decided to move all the people into the mountains with M'Baku and away from the capital city to protect them. And we go back to Agent Ross, and Agent Ross is in his home. He sees that DeFontaine is in his house, and she says that she bugged the Kimoyo beads. She knows that he's been helping them, and he gets arrested. So really just a lose-lose-lose for our protagonist here, okay? Shuri returns to the lab where she was working on synthesizing that heart-shaped herb to save her brother and failing. And she's like, we gotta fix this. You kind of see that in her eyes, that moment where she's going to experiment on this again. And now she has something she didn't have before. Like I mentioned, she got that bracelet from Namor that has the piece of the heart-shaped herb fiber, right? And she uses that to then synthesize a new herb, okay? And this was the only part of the movie that felt like a bit of a stretch, but it works. Okay, she's able to make the drink again, and she takes it herself to become the Black Panther. Okay, and she goes to sleep, just like in the first Black Panther movie. And in the first movie, T'Challa wakes up in the ancestral plane, and we know it's the ancestral plane because the skies are purple. And he sees his father, and they have this back and forth dialogue. I'm not ready to be gone without you. And his father says, the biggest failure I can have as a father is not preparing my children for their death. Awesome scene. He wakes up as Black Panther. Very cool. Shuri wakes up in the throne room. Again, we see the purple skies, ancestral plane. She walks around to see who's sitting in the throne, and it is her cousin, N'Jadaka. Okay, we see Eric Killmonger again, and he gives her like this tough guy speech of like, who are you going to be? Are you going to be the girl who gets stuff done, or are you going to die like your brother? Are you going to be this honorable guy, or are you going to get it done? And she wakes up, tells Nakia that she sees no one, that, the whole thing was a fraud. Again, that science versus their kind of cultural tradition clash. But she does have the powers of the Black Panther. So now we get our classic montage of them making their suits, and she chooses her suit, and Riri Williams is working on her Ironheart suit, which gets revealed later. Shuri was working on these suits for the Dora Milaje called the Midnight Angels, okay? And that's based off of the Dora Milaje had like an even like stronger, like almost like Navy SEAL group, and they were called the Midnight Angels in the comics. So a good tie there. And we first get the reveal of Shuri's Black Panther during a council meeting in M'Baku's kind of area, and she jumps down from the ceiling. Very cool reveal, just like T'Challa's suit where it's made out of the vibranium, and it kind of goes back, revealing her face, and she's like, look, we're taking the fight to him. We're going to do this. And we figured out a way to beat Namor, where her and Riri figure out that he most likely, Namor diffuses water through his skin like a jellyfish, which again, a bit of a stretch, but it was cool, okay? And that if they dehydrate him enough, that they might be able to weaken him and fight him. So it's this whole thing. M'Baku warns her, and this has now become a TikTok trend of his speech to her, that killing him isn't going to solve anything. They don't call him chief. They don't call him king. They call him God, right? And so that's not going to solve anything. It's going to make everything worse. And she says, I don't care. Shuri's got the, I want blood eyes. They come up with this plan, and their plan is essentially to draw out the Talocanil by making a new vibranium detector, because they have Riri Williams, who's the only scientist who knows how to do this, putting it at the bottom of the ocean, disguising a huge ship of theirs in their cloaking technology, and luring them out and fighting them there. Which, for me, I was like, why would they fight the people who can breathe underwater, surrounded by water? But whatever. This happens, it works, they draw them out, they start this fight, and we see the Wakandans fighting, which is one of my favorite things. In the first movie, we see the Dora Milaje and the border tribe fight side by side. Super cool. That was with the rhinos and everything. And in this one, we see M'Baku and the mountain people and the Dora Milaje fighting side by side. They're rappelling off the side of the ship and fighting them. It's super cool. And we see the Ironheart armor. It looks interesting. I'll say that for one. It's definitely not our traditional Iron Man. It kind of reminded me of that one show, that animated show growing up about the teenage robot, but whatever, she looks dope. And they get this fighting, and they eventually capture Namor in this ship that they made into this dehydrator, and they, pull all the water from his body, and they start fighting, and Shuri and him crash on a beach, and they have this drawn-out fight sequence where Shuri gets stabbed. And Namor kind of gets up, and he's really phased. He's trying to walk towards the water. Shuri claws out the spear and they fights him and blasts him with the jet propulsion from the ship and burns him, has his own spear made of vibranium at his neck, and hears the voice of her mother saying, show him who you are. A direct callback to the first movie. And she comes to terms with the fact that her grief has driven her to vengeance, and that vengeance won't get them anywhere again. M'Baku's counsel. And her and Namor decide, look, us killing each other isn't going to help anything. And she says, if you go back to your people I will protect your secret, because again, no one knows that these Talokanil exist, and protect your people. And he just agrees. He's like, it's either this or death, and I'm the only one who can protect my people. But what we don't know, or what they don't know, is that the people of Talocan are beating the Wakandans heavily. They're surrounded by the time that they get back, and he like calls off his people, they go into the water, and they go their separate ways. And I don't know, it felt like an interesting ending to the fight. I understand the point of the fight wasn't to fight. It wasn't like Infinity War. It wasn't like Endgame where we just want to see this big drawn-out battle. The point is for Shuri to see who she is, to grow through the grief, okay? To tie up loose ends, Okoye frees Agent Ross from CIA custody. I'm assuming taking him back to Wakanda. We don't really see where they go. And we see the waterfall ceremony from the first movie, and we're assuming Shuri is going to come out, declare that she's the rightful leader of Wakanda, be stripped of the Black Panther mantle, fight for it, and get it back. But instead, M'Baku comes off the ship and says, I, believe that I am the rightful leader of Wakanda. And my wife and I had a little discussion about this, and I think that him and Shuri agreed to this. But she was more leaning to the fact that maybe he, kind of took it from her. But Shuri's not there. She's in Haiti with Nakia. And she goes down to the beach and she burns her funeral garb and she thinks of her mother and of T'Challa. And that's the movie. Credits start rolling and we see this stuff. And obviously, every good MCU fan knows, stay in your seat. We get to a mid-credit scene and it opens back on Shuri, sitting there. And she's sitting and thinking, and Nakia shows up, and with her is a little boy. And this little boy is revealed to be her and T'Challa's son, named T'Challa. So this is now Prince T'Challa II. Okay, he is the rightful heir to the throne of Wakanda. In the comics, there have been a couple different, and in shows, there have been a couple different sons of T'Challa. This is very interesting. It's very cool. It's a great reveal. I love that his name is T'Challa as well. And they agreed, her and T'Challa the first, I assume, or senior, that the pressure of the throne would be too much for the child and that he had prepared them for his death. And like I mentioned earlier, that's the exact thing that his father had said to him, that, it would be a failure of me as a father to not prepare my family for my death. And it was just a very cool end to this circle. And what I loved is that this was the true end of the movie. And it is still Shuri's movie. It is still Wakanda's movie. It is still a Talocan story. It is still the introduction of Riri Williams. But at the end of the day, it is a memorial to Chadwick. And that was awesome. There is no end credit scene. And for me, that just made sense. They don't want to reveal a new character or a new idea or new storyline when they had ended it perfectly with this memorial. Now to the review. Okay, like I mentioned before, this story is all about grief and our responses to it. And it's told through our two main storylines of Shuri and Namor. Okay, Namor, I want to start with something. I love that there is Latino representation in an MCU film. Awesome. Do I love that he's cast as the villain? No. But I'm not going to complain about it because it's awesome that he's on the big screen in the first place. I feel like they represented the Aztec people in the best way that they could, that they represented Mesoamerica in an awesome way. And again, I don't love that he's just the villain that's out to kill everyone, but that is kind of comic accurate to him. And just because that they used this new background doesn't make me hate what they did, or doesn't make me, doesn't make the representation any less. I love that. I think it's a celebration of Latin American culture, and for me, was awesome. Do I think they made his character different than the comics? Yes. Does that bother me? No. Should it bother you? Absolutely not. If your issue with an MCU movie or character is the only issue is that it is not the same as the comics, your expectations of what you were getting from Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios is wrong. It's an incorrect assumption to think that you were getting a one-for-one comic panel to big screen It just doesn't make sense. These are adaptations. They are taking beloved characters or new characters and retconning those stories and making them into something that fits into their jigsaw puzzle. Kevin Feige is one of the only people in MCU that has succeeded in making a franchise. And don't tell me about Star Wars. I don't want to hear about how Star Wars did this well, because they did not. The sequel movies did not do this well. They have done this in such a good way that I think that we shouldn't be complaining about that, oh, they don't look like their comic characters. They don't do the same thing. Just quit whining about that. That doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, back to my review. Okay, Shuri, in losing her whole family, begins the movie by hating herself, hating the world, wishing she could have done more, blaming herself, and throwing everything into her work, distracting herself, trying to serve her people. And she openly tells her mom in that initial scene of when they're going to burn their funeral stuff that she doesn't care if the world burns. She is that upset. She truly does feel that T'Challa's death and Namor's threats could be solved if she worked harder. And what makes this Phase 4 film so powerful, besides the beautiful costume design and the writing and the sound design, is that the fact that they're displaying true human emotion. The story of loss and pain and how we fail to emote and to cope in a healthy way is something that most people can relate to. This story is truly relatable. Yes, it's hyperbolic and it's drawn out and it's an MCU superhero movie. But the idea of trying to understand grief makes sense to a lot of people. Okay, let's look at just Phase 4. Your favorite movies, your favorite pieces, and Phase 4 is starting with Black Widow up until now. Okay, think of all the movies and shows. Okay, I bet I can name your favorite ones. Spider-Man, No Way Home. Loki, maybe Moon Knight. Some of us really love Shang-Chi. I know I did. Maybe Doctor Strange. I liked Hawkeye and What If. Okay, but the true top tier ones are Spider-Man, No Way Home, Loki, Wakanda Forever, and Moon Knight is my honorable mention. And they tell, again, hyperbolic and overdrawn, relatable stories. They tell relatable stories. The issue with the recent MCU is that they've lost their appeal and their emotional spectrum. Things like She-Hulk and Thor Love and Thunder, they're just full of random goofy jokes and not a whole lot of like the great writing and dialogue. They try to supplement good writing with a love interest, and that doesn't work. Bringing, like, both of them do the same exact thing. Okay, they bring in an old character that was loved. Jane Foster, a lot of people loved her, and Natalie Portman, and Charlie Cox's Daredevil, to bring them in as love interests. Instead of writing a good movie or show, they instead just, here, look, they're in love. And it's so different from like Loki and Moon Knight that tell a captivating story of finding yourself and trying to understand who you are and coming to terms with who you are and loving who you are. And No Way Home and Wakanda Forever, stories of grief and pain and the fear of the future and the fear of loss and emerging through it and working through it and becoming stronger. These are all ideas that we know and we can at least have seen someone go through or have gone through ourselves. Wakanda Forever succeeds because it grips an audience not with the goofy comedy or odd love interests, but because its story resonates with you. Or with me, at least. Okay? And my hope is that the MCU keeps this up as we look forward to new projects like Ant-Man and things like that. That is my hope. My hope is that the MCU can see how well this movie succeeded and be able to draw that line between the movies and shows like I did. That they can see, look, we do love the big fight sequences. We do love the new characters. We love all of that. But it still has to be a good movie. It still has to be emotionally compelling. But hey, that's just my thought on it. If you made it to the end of the video, I want to say thank you. If you enjoyed it, throw a like on the video, maybe hit subscribe. I've got new videos every Tuesday and Friday. If you had other opinions or other thoughts in mind, throw a comment on there. I'd love to read those. And if not, well then, peace.
Let's go.